I just wasn't doing well. So I really, really struggled. And I finished 10th in the country at the national championships in 1986. And I was expected to be at least in the top 3, if not first. I had already filled out all the paperwork for the first ever Goodwill Games that was in Moscow that year. I had the visas for it. It was kind of assumed who would be on that team. And for whatever reason, a lot of us struggled at that meet. And anyways, I got sent to Brazil and Argentina instead, kind of with a B team, which ended up being an absolutely pivotal trip in my life.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Rise and Grind. Every once in a while, you get the opportunity to sit down with someone whose name is just etched in greatness, not just because of what they accomplished, but because of the standard they set. Today's guest is one of those people. Missy Marlowe is a 5-time U.S. national team member, the 1987 USA Gymnastics Athlete of the Year, and an Olympian representing the United States on the 1988 Olympic team. At the collegiate level, she didn't just compete, she dominated. A 12-time NCAA All-American, a 7-time national champion, 5 individual titles, and 2 team championships, and the recipient of the prestigious AAI Award. In 1992, she made history, winning the Honda Cup, an honor given to the top female collegiate athlete in the nation, becoming one of only a handful of gymnasts to ever receive it in over 50 years. Her legacy has been recognized with induction into multiple Hall of Fames, including USA Gymnastics, the Utah Sports Hall of Fame, the Pac-12 Hall of Honor, and the Crimson Club Hall of Fame. But as we know on this show, greatness isn't just about medals and awards. It's about the discipline, the sacrifice, the setbacks, and the mindset it takes to rise to that level. Missy, it is such an honor to have you on the show, and welcome.
Thank you, Thurl. You made me sit up a little taller here reading all of that. That's very kind. I appreciate that.
Well, I've got to put this out there because, we had a pretty chance encounter in Amsterdam. We both were waiting to get on the flight to return back to Salt Lake City. And I didn't tell you this, but I looked at you and I knew I recognized you. But it took your courage to walk over to this 7-foot guy standing out in an airport and because you recognized me, to introduce yourself. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it took me a minute too. I think I looked at you for a good 15 minutes before I got up the nerve to go and say hi. I mean, you're pretty recognizable, right? I should have known that sooner. But, you never know. It's kind of, I think we've all maybe thought we saw someone we knew and didn't. So it did take me a minute, but it was really great to run into you. And you're right, you were sitting in the back, and I can't give a 7-foot tall man enough credit. That was some tight quarters. I'm impressed that you made it through that 9.5-hour flight the way you did.
Well, I did take a couple of selfies with you in it, but I think I cut my head off in a couple, so I'll send you those.
Probably. Thank you.
So, Missy, let's dive in. Let's start at the beginning. That's a good place. So, when did gymnastics go from something you enjoyed to something you knew you wanted to pursue seriously?
Well, I started in a little 1-hour DCE class at the University of Utah. My mom enrolled me. It wasn't much. And I think I was 6 years old. Lived in, I didn't grow up with the cards stacked for me, so to speak. We lived in a different apartment every year. My mom and my parents divorced when I was 2. My father struggled with alcoholism his entire life, really until he died last year. And it was just kind of the 2 of us. She worked full time. She got a master's degree from the University of Utah in counseling, excuse me. So it was kind of just the two of us, and it just started in a one-hour class at the University of Utah. And that coach left that program and opened a gym in Bountiful at the time. And he just said, can Missy come? And I want her to try out for my new team. And that's how it all started. And so I went and my mom, to her credit, she's like, well, we'll figure it out. I don't know how I'm going to get my daughter to Bountiful, a couple of times a week working full time, but
Sacrifice.
pooled resources, yes, and got it done. And I went from 1 hour a week to a couple times a week for 2 to 3 hours. And I loved the sport of gymnastics. I don't know if athletes can always say what it was about their sport, that drew them in, but I was small, very, very flexible, just inherently flexible. And I just loved the movement of it. And I wasn't scared. I didn't have a big fear factor. So I was willing to kind of a little bit of a daredevil. So it came kind of naturally that way. As a super spazzy kid, just bouncing off the walls, not in like an ADD kind of way, but just energy. And I just loved the movement of gymnastics. And I would go out, I'd spend all recess tumbling in elementary school, swinging on the bars. I taught myself some things at recess that a lot of kids, have to go into the gym and spend years learning. And to me, it was just playtime. So it all started kind of from there, and just the way sports works. One year, you're one level. If you try for the next level, you make it. It really was playtime until about 6th grade. So about the first 3-4 years of actual classes was playtime. And I learned to love it.
And so, what age were you when it really started to become a competition, really?
Well, that gym that I was at closed for a couple months. They had financial trouble, and that was after my 5th grade year of school. So very young, right? I know that sounds young, but I switched to a gym. I either had to quit or we had to switch to the one gym in the Salt Lake Valley that was really, really advanced. And so I made that switch the summer before 6th grade. And that summer started 5 days a week for 5 hours every day, from 8 to 1-ish in the afternoon, every day. And it was a really, really hard transition. So I would say that was the first time where it maybe wasn't fun, where it was really serious, where the coaching was more intense, where I had a couple coaches that were wonderful and a couple that were a little bit mean, that I didn't care for so much. And that was probably my pivotal time of deciding, am I going to do it? Am I not going to do this? And I went to my mom one day. I think it was we're going way back now, but midsummer. And I'm just like, I don't know if I want to do this. And she said, let's stick it out through summer. And then you can decide, because this upcoming school year was going to take a whole lot of finagling to make it work. And it was enough time to just get adjusted. And what I noticed was that I was starting to catch up to the girls that were older and had been at this gym longer. And I was starting to do the really cool skills that I didn't know I could do. And so somewhere along the way, I just decided that it was worth it. And then when I enrolled in 6th grade, I went to gymnastics from 1 to 6 on Mondays and Fridays, and then from 3:30 to 8:30 Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And I guess that's when you could say kind of the grind started for real.
Well, that answers my next question was going to be about that daily discipline. What did that look like? But the other question I wanted to ask, because it's, as well as I do, sports is interesting, especially when you're young, because there's all these people out there that at some point have a similar desire as you. And at a certain point, when it starts to get serious, you're separated from those who are just, it's just fun. So at that level, at that competitive level, my guess is that most of the girls, or everyone at some level, is talented. So what separated you, even at that young age, maybe mentally, from the physical part of maybe what some of the other girls did not have or were trying to develop?
Well, on my private club, even though we were kind of a smaller club from Salt Lake City, I had some really, really talented teammates. And I was one of 3 at one time that were actually on that qualified all the way to elite and to the national team. So I had really good teammates to train with. But yeah, you're right. Once you reach a certain point, it gets a little bit lonelier. But I will say my best friends were in the gym. I did not fit a typical Utah mold. If you go back to the 1970s, And you think about the demographics in Salt Lake City. I was an only child. All of my friends at school had 5 to 7 brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
My parents
Yeah.
were divorced. All their parents were married. We didn't have much money. They all lived in the giant houses up behind the U, you know? I didn't have problems in school socially. I had a couple good friends there, but I didn't really fit in. But at the
Hmm.
gym, I fit in. And I was comfortable at the gym, and I had teammates that were my best friends, and that's who I socialized with. So I had really, really good friends there, many of whom I'm still really close to this day. So I was comfortable in the gym. And at some point, it just becomes a process of elimination through competitions. And so most of the competitions I went to, none of them on the national team were with my teammates. I was the only one that made it to that level, that high of a level. But training wise, my best friends were in the gym. But, you know,
Gotcha.
I started traveling internationally in 6th grade. And
Wow.
my first, yeah, I know it sounds crazy. My first trip out of the country, and it was only to Canada, but it was still out of the country. You know, I flew by myself. This was a team competition with other juniors around the country, and it was Canada, Italy, France. I can't remember the other teams that were there. But we had to call Orrin Hatch, at the time Senator Hatch, and get a passport expedited. I don't know if you remember how the senators used to be the ones to push those through quickly. And my mom put me on a plane, and they said, "Don't lose your passport. The coaches will be waiting for you after customs." And I was in tears. I'm like, "What's customs? And what happens if I lose this document?" You know, it was really intimidating. And so I just got used to doing things at a young age that were pretty independent. And of course, you know, I got to Canada, everything was fine, had the time of my life, and just fell in love with the travel. And for me, I was lucky because my work in the gym really paid off at a young age. Um, and then from there on, I competed in 11 other countries through the course of junior high and high school.
So,
Yeah,
obviously, there are going to be a lot of moms and young girls, and it doesn't even have to be gymnastics, but that are interested in sports. You talked a little bit about early when you were trying to transition from it being fun to serious. Um, do you ever have those days? What did you do if you did? I'm sure you did have those days when you didn't feel like it. You didn't feel like maybe you had second thoughts about
sure.
was it too hard?
Right.
What did
Well,
you do?
everybody does. I mean, obviously, everybody does. I think mine wasn't, I really didn't struggle with, is it worth it, until I was all the way into my senior year in high school. Like at the
Mm,
end, the year before the Olympics was really, really tough. Up until that point, it was, I loved being in the gym. I really did. And my mom never made me do it. She was never that parent. If anything, she was a little bit non-competitive and
okay.
didn't really love the competitive aspect of it. She was kind of more she's an interesting mix of super feisty, but not in an organized competitive kind of way. So, um I love being in the gym. Really more what was hard for me was, like, the physical pain of the injuries because there's not a lot of downtime at that level. So,
Right.
on a daily basis, you get the bloody rips, you know, and you're expected to do bars anyways, and you can't even make a fist with your hands. They hurt so bad, you know, and your skin's peeled back and kinda raw and gross, and, you know, those were the days I remember, the sore ankles. I had shin splints for the last 4 years in college and 4 years in club gymnastics that just hurt to even walk, and then we discovered my freshman year of college that I had some stress fractures in my back that had healed. So, I'd say those were the things that got frustrating for me because honestly, I didn't mind the work. I liked the grind. I liked the discipline of it. I showed up I think I showed up ready to work every day, and I wanted that. I really, really wanted that. It was a source of pride for me, and like I said, not really fitting in socially real well with the typical Utah kid. It was something that
Yeah.
set me apart, and it's something that I had, and it's something that I was proud of. So that push wasn't it, but I say it was just the pain of not really one singular great injury, but just the cumulative things that kinda get tiring every day.
You like the grind. I love that. Love that. So here's a question for you. along those lines, you started this at a very young age, and you talked about, you know, getting into high school. Were you, do you feel like you were chasing greatness or you were trying not to fail?
That's a great question. Maybe a little bit of both because, and I'll say why. Competing aggressively did not come naturally to me at all. And in fact, when I was 14, I started working really closely with the sports psychologist of the Utah Jazz, Dr. Keith Henshin. I don't know if you
I
knew
I knew
Dr.
Keith.
Henshin, but
I didn't know Keith.
and we ended up really close. By the time I was done with gymnastics, I was a lot of work for him. But I loved to be in the gym. I did not love to compete, and especially balance beam would just give me fits. Not practicing it didn't scare me to do like it does most young gymnasts, but I did not like to compete it. So I worked closely with him when the competition side of it really started to fail. And I think to what you said, maybe being more afraid of making a mistake than of seeing, on a positive side where it could go. And that's what sports psychology does, is it teaches you to change that thinking. I think for me, it took all the way to my sophomore year of college before I really started to embrace that
Hmm.
and went from a mindset of being afraid to fail to now I want to win. And it's because of the team that we had behind us at the University of Utah and my coaches up there.
So let's jump to USA Gymnastics Athlete of the Year. Great honor, of course, but did that create more pressure on you, or
Well,
were you able to handle that?
no, that particular award came in 1987, and in 1986, I really struggled.
Mm,
Not with not with wanting to quit. I never wanted to quit, but just I wasn't competing well, and I wasn't doing well, and I was on the verge of changing gyms. And at the time, that meant moving away from home and living in someone else's house and going to either Bella Caroli's in Texas or to Scats in Southern California. And so it's just a really stressful time, and I didn't want to leave, I just wasn't doing well. So I really, really struggled, and I finished 10th in the country at the national championships in 1986, and I was expected to be at least in the top 3, if not first. I had already filled out all the paperwork for the first ever Goodwill Games that was in Moscow that year. I had, the visas for it, it was kind of assumed who would be on that team, and for whatever reason, a lot of us struggled at that meet. And anyways, I got sent to Brazil and Argentina instead, kind of with a B team, which ended up being an absolutely pivotal trip in my life, completely, totally pivotal that, to this day, I'm so grateful for. But at the time, it was very devastating. And so we just kind of reevaluated. I kept working with Keith, with Dr. Henshin. I worked with my coaches really well and just refocused. You do what you do, what you do. And I wasn't going to quit. I wasn't going to quit over it. It was just kind of what's going to happen from now. And so I came back really strong in 1987, and I was second at the national championships. And I think that's where that award came from, was to kind of recognize where I was and then where I dropped to and then where I got back to.
Was it normal back then for an athlete to have a Keith Henshin, to have a
No,
sports psychologist? Yeah, I didn't think
no.
so.
USA Gymnastics had tried to bring him on, and he got a lot of pushback actually from Bella Caroli, because
Mm,
Bella didn't want anyone messing, as he thought of it, messing with his athletes. He was
yeah.
really firmly wanted to be in control. So no, Dr. Henshin was established really well. He was on 5 different governing boards for different teams. I know track and field was one of them. USA basketball, he was with the Jazz, me, and already at the University of Utah, and with the gymnasts up there and other teams up there. But no, it was pretty unusual to work one-on-one with someone, and I was really, really lucky. I know he did it for a discounted price because at the time we couldn't afford him, and
So what was the
he
mindset with a coach like Bella? Was it not as important in that era?
well,
The
my coaches were kind. I mean, they really were. I had kind coaches, and to me at least, they weren't yellers and screamers. They weren't mean. They were kind coaches. Not all
mm,
gymnasts can say that for sure.
right, right.
Um, but with Keith, it gave me someone to talk about gymnastics with, talk about life with. And what you learn is just how to compartmentalize and how to
Yeah.
not let anything from the outside enter your gymnastics time or your training time. And I learned how to make gym my safe space rather than
Mm.
my stressful space. And it was invaluable. I still, I still have skills from my days with Dr. Henshin.
Well, it sounds like Dr. Hinchin was your safe space
Hmm.
and the gym was your safe place, which is it's pretty powerful. Now I want to dive a little more inside your craft. Okay, so um, right before you begin a routine at that level, how do you process it? What's going through your mind?
What I learned to do is just visualization. I think what every free throw shooter does when you're standing in the line, you just picture that ball going in. And that's what I learned to do, except on balance beam. Never got there. I never once
Ever.
ever won. Nope. Right. I mean, I won balance beam twice in college in the NCAA championships, and I never once wanted to do that beam routine. Everything else
Mm,
came along well.
gotcha.
But it's visualization, it's taking deep breaths, and it's at the time no one used the phrase trust your training, but that's really my favorite phrase now is trust your training. Um, and just trying to realize that you learn how to cut out the distractions, you learn how to turn off the noise and you learn how to focus. But because I never got over being that little bit of a nervous competitor. I used adrenaline. I learned how to use adrenaline to help. On beam, it never helps. But on the other three events, on bars, beam, and floor, it can help a little bit. So you have to learn how to channel the energy and channel the stressors into something that is useful rather than hurtful. And it takes years to do that. Years.
In my profession in basketball, we have this saying, and I had a few moments like this about being in the zone.
Mhm.
Do you ever have those moments? I'm sure you did, where uh, you were maybe not perfect, but close to it, or maybe even perfect. How
Mhm.
did that feel, and how were you able to kind of compartmentalize that and use it?
As I matured through the sport and got to the University of Utah, I went from kind of, okay, let's survive this meet to, okay, let's score a 10.
Mm,
And that was, thanks to Greg Marston, Megan Marsden, Jim Stevenson, our assistant coach, Dr. Henshin, and just really Dr. Hill, our athletic director. There was so much support there and so much positive energy that we could really focus and key in on that. And it, after my freshman year, which was not pretty, my freshman year was horrible. And I had to kind of reevaluate and decide if I was going to quit or come back. I decided, this is it. Nothing's going to stop me. And I had the support to do that. And at that point, I realized that I could take it wherever I wanted to go. And I didn't want to just be good and I didn't want to float. I had the ability and I had the backing and the support to, try to be the best. And I got really, really hungry again, like I had been in 1987. Leading up to the Olympics, I got really hungry again. And the people of Utah, as you know, are the absolute best. I mean, the fans of the University of Utah are unbeatable. So that part wasn't hard at all. It was, I wanted to do it for them. I wanted to do it for my teammates. I wanted to do it for my coaches. And every time I learned how to salute and say, I'm not just going to hit this routine. I want a 9.9. I want a 9.95. Things go well. I want a 10.
hmm Okay, tell us what it felt like stepping out onto that Olympic stage.
The Olympics are a whole different thing.
I bet.
It's it's really hard. You can't prepare yourself for the Olympics, I don't think. And we saw that, we're coming off the Winter Olympics and we saw some superstars absolutely excel. And then we saw, some of the skaters not so much and kind of say I thought I was prepared and maybe, mentally I wasn't. And that is completely true. It is so enormous and so much bigger than you are. Um, there's not World Championships doesn't touch the Olympic Games. The Pan American Games doesn't touch the Olympic Games. And it's just everything. It's the signage, the mascots, the energy, the thousands and thousands of people, the village, the press. It's unrelenting, and you never get away from it. I understand now why some athletes choose to stay outside the village, even though I
Yeah.
kind of think that's a shame and that you miss out on experiencing it. Mentally, it does make sense. It's so enormous and it's so overwhelming. And there's just, you walk in and you just feel like this can't be real. And yet you have to focus harder than you've ever focused in your life. And, and it's hard. And, some of the countries, remember, this is the communist era. So the Russians, Romanian, the Chinese, they were used to, I won't say more serious. We trained very, very seriously, but, I was allowed to have kind of that moment of awe, I would
Mm.
say. While I didn't feel like a robot out there, and I really had to take a deep breath and rein it in because it's a very overwhelming experience and
Well,
absolutely amazing.
you had imagined that experience when you're young. Did it match your experience that you had growing up, or just exceeded
It's
it?
surreal. I didn't really start thinking about the Olympics though until I was probably maybe even 15, where it's like, oh my gosh, this is getting close now. Now we're within a couple years. Could this
Mm.
even really happen? Is this actually real? And then it kind of kicked in. But no, you walk into the arena and you're like, I can't even believe this is happening. And that's even different than making the Olympic team at Olympic trials. It's different than going through processing. The processing alone is a crazy event. You're sending bags and bags and bags of goods home, and it's like people are just giving you all this stuff. It's amazing. You're watching videos about terrorism and what they're going to do if someone tries to attack the dorms. They talk about how we fly over on commercial airlines so that there's not a terrorist target, to blow up. I mean, it's intense. It's a
Okay.
lot. It's a lot at any time, and it's a whole lot when you're 17.
Well, we will be right back to continue our conversation with Missy Marlowe. So hang in there. We'll be right back in just a second. Hey guys, time out. You give your best to your work, your family, and your responsibilities. But to keep showing up strong, you've got to stay dialed in. At Game Day Men's Health, the nation's leading men's clinic, they help you get back in the game with a custom game plan built around your labs, your goals, and your performance. Testosterone, peptides, real optimization. Come in today for a free testosterone test and consult. Tell them Big T sent you, and you get 50% off your first year membership. GameDayMen'sHealth.com. Victory starts within. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to this episode of Rise and Grind. We are been talking to decorated gymnast Missy Marlowe and all of her accomplishments and the grind that she loves so much that got her all the accolades and medals and awards and Hall of Fames. It's been really interesting talking to you as a former athlete myself, right? And drawing some of those parallels, Missy. I think one of the things that maybe separates us a little bit is in basketball, you always have these other guys around. It's definitely a team sport. And I know to some degree, you're associated with a team, but for the most part, there's a lot of individual work that has to be put in. When you were growing up, I mean, did you ever participate in like team sports
Nope.
and no?
Nothing else. Nope. My mom took me skiing a few times, and as crazy as it sounds, I didn't like it. She tried to get me to play tennis a little bit. Now I wish
Wasn't
I was a
having
good tennis player, but at the time wasn't having it. Nope, that's what I
you,
love to do. There was nothing
you,
else. I took dance for a couple of years, but basketball, oh, that would
okay,
have been a disaster.
not
Um,
necessarily.
but now the thing that's cool about gymnastics, and I tell people this all the time, everyone should put their kids in gymnastics. Whatever they go on to do, they will be 100 times better. There is nothing better for the development of children, I think, than gymnastics. You'll be a better basketball player. You'll be a better football player. You'll be a better soccer player, anything.
I'm
Nothing
so
gets
glad
the
you
upper
said that.
body. Yeah, it's just such an amazing sport. And Obviously most kids aren't going to stick with it long term, but you will be better at everything you go on to do for it. And, a lot of basketball, or a lot of, I don't know about basketball, I meant to say football. If you can get your football players to take dance, they're going to be better football players. Like just the development is so important. So huge
So on board.
gymnastics fan.
So on board because my wife Cindy and I, we have 2 basketball players and a boys and a volleyball player, and they started in gymnastics.
Awesome. I love it.
The problem came when my daughter she's 6'4".
That's a problem.
My 2 sons, 6'8" and 6'10". So, they kind of grew out of it. But you're right. I mean, it really helped them in the sports that they decided to pursue. So I want to get into identity now in life after sport, because for all of us, even me as a basketball player, we get to the point where we have to plan after the sport. So when your competitive career ended, who were you without gymnastics?
The first time I watched a Utah gymnastics meet from the stands, I put my head down and I cried. It was awful. I hated it. I hear athletes all the time, and I think it's really, really healthy, but they say, that's not who I was. It's just what I did. But I don't feel like that. Like, to me, gymnastics is who I was, and it is who I am. And personally, I love that. I can understand how maybe psychologists would say that's not necessarily the healthiest view you can have, but that's my story. I love the sport, and I still identify with it. I still sit back. I remember my routines. I remember the moves. I remember the feeling, and I love that I have that memory, and they're really, really important to me. But yeah, it's very hard to move on. I owned a gym for 8 years.
Sorry, the transition was difficult.
Very. It still is 35 years later. I still want to go back and do it again. At the time, I was, so sore and hurting. And I was talking to the youth gymnasts a couple different times over the last 2 years. And I'm like, you're sore, you're tired after the championships. You can barely walk. You just want to get out of there. But that goes away in a couple weeks. And then you want it back and you get hungry again. But it is hard to transition. I owned a gym for 8 years, and I coached for a long time. And then eventually my older daughter, both my kids did it. My older daughter did it in college at a really high level. And she ended up back at the club that she had originally started at. And at that point, I really had to step back. And it's hard. It's hard, but I have friends all over the country, and a lot of us former national team members, former collegiate athletes, and there's nothing that makes us happier than getting together with our teammates. It's my comfort zone. I'm comfortable around athletes. I am comfortable, and it doesn't matter, men, women, any sports. It doesn't matter. It's kind of my happy place. So I've never lost a sense of that.
Well, my era was before yours, but even into your era of gymnastics, we didn't have a lot of what these young athletes have at their disposal, some good, some bad. You competed like I did before social media. How different would that experience have been if everything was being judged real time?
I can't even imagine it. I don't think if we haven't truly lived it, we could have imagined it. I was, especially through high school, really, really disciplined. There would have been nothing to see on my end, but college, we had some fun. And if we were, our rule was kind of don't ever embarrass the program, don't embarrass the coaches, but they knew that we were going to have a life outside of the gym. And as long as that was, kept reasonable, it was fine. I don't know how they do it now. I think it's mostly really sad and quite fake and very surface level, but it is the reality, and it is something they have to deal with. My kids, your kids are the generation just in the heart of social media, and I'm pretty active on social media now, but as an adult, there's it doesn't matter. People can listen to me or not. It doesn't matter. But as an athlete back in the in the day, boy, Thurl, I don't know. I can't imagine it. I personally think it would have been awful.
Well, you're mentoring your own kids, of course, but you were, if you're mentoring kids in this day and age, what would you teach them about handling that kind of noise?
It's really easy to say, oh, it just doesn't matter. Who cares what strangers think of you? Me, as an almost 55-year adult, I can say that and I can believe it. But when you're, 17, 18, 22 years old, whatever, I don't know if you have the maturity to do that, and it
Yeah.
hurts. And you even hear of, actors and actresses or really, really famous athletes that say, even Lindsey Vonn of this last Olympics, man, some of these words really, really hurt. I think that's what therapists are for, and to help, or whoever your inner circle is, whether it's your church, your teachers, your family, your therapists, to block it out. That's a whole nother skill that we didn't have to deal with on that level. And I think it seems awful. I love that athletes can make more money now, or well, in some ways, NIL is kind of a hot mess, but I love that there are opportunities for them. I love that I get to see, again, for example, the last Winter Olympians on a level that I never would have known before. And they're super cool people. It's been fun, but there's a price to pay. And as a coach, I mean, you probably should, and I know in college they're having, sit down sessions about how to manage this and how to be a little careful about what you put out, because it's not a free for all. It can't be.
So, what concerns you most about the pressure that young gymnasts are facing today, other than the social media part? Are there any other things that they're
Well,
dealing with?
gymnastics has gone through a lot of upheaval. And when the Larry Nassar scandal broke,
Yeah.
things were just end on end. And, I knew him not well, but I did. I actually predated him. He came into USA Gymnastics the year I retired after 1988. But that whole thing was on such a horrific level, and things were so bad for so many years. But what came out of that was a renewed energy to allow athletes, and especially gymnasts, young athletes, and especially women also, to speak up and talk. And it started a dialogue that is still going to this day that didn't used to be there. Mental health I don't feel like it really existed in my day.
Right.
As much as Keith Henson helped me with pressure, it wasn't really mental health the way it is now. So that has come a long, long way. And the fact that most good schools have a psychologist available and is, deemed your head psychologist that you can go to is really, really important, especially with the added pressure that you talk about of social media, where you're not in control of what people are saying, and you're not really in control a lot of times of what they're seeing and what they're doing. That has changed a lot. The weight issue has gotten infinitely better. I was weighed in as a gymnast every day, 5 days a week from the age of 15 to 20.
Mm.
And only for a brief period of time was I actually in trouble. But I was of the generation that was in trouble for, being overweight. And I think from a systemic point of view, coming from the coaches, that's largely doesn't happen anymore. Now, I don't want people to get upset with me, but because obviously athletes and gymnasts and dancers, divers, ice skaters, they all have the pressure on themselves. Models, actresses. I mean, it's not unique to sports.
Yeah.
It's everybody.
Well,
Even
body
even
shaming.
long distance runners. Like it's across the sports. But I think there's a lot of scrutiny now if that kind of pressure comes directly from a coach the way it used
Mm,
to.
yeah.
There are people you can tell, and there are people that you can report to. So, again, I don't want anyone to be mad at me and saying that's not the case, but I do think there have been strides made there. And the fact that you should be able to go to your coach and talk to them, I think that's what separates a great coach from a good coach. I know not athletes. I mean, I have, one daughter that's still in collegiate sports right now, and she doesn't speak up the way I would like her to. Of course, that's coming from my high perch of wisdom here as a mother. But but there are discussions about it, and there are advocates out there for it, and that didn't used to happen. I think that's getting better.
Yeah. So, what does Missy Marlowe do for fun? What I mean, I know you're raising
Well, when I
kids.
saw you, I was having fun. I'll tell you that. Um, so I hit a little bit of a wall last year. I said, this summer, I'm turning 55. And I'm like, man, that's kind of old. I'm getting up there. So I set some new goals just physically. I don't know if you feel it, Thurl, but it's hard getting older when you're used to using your
Oh yeah.
body. And, and gymnastics is such a hyper flexible, hyper mobile sport. And so I got a crazy idea in my head to try to run a marathon. Thank goodness that didn't really pan out because my friend and I didn't get into the one we wanted to sign up for. But we're still hoping to go back and do a couple halves. And you have to understand, I hate running and I don't do it. And a vault runway is 84 feet, and I've never run more than 12 steps my entire life. But I decided I had to do something. I took a really, really amazing trip last year to Croatia and Greece. And I was gone for 2.5 weeks. It's the longest I've ever been anywhere on vacation. And I did about 2/3 of the trip by myself. And I'm not married. I've been divorced for 13 years. And that was really liberating. I wasn't afraid because of my childhood. I mean, I didn't think twice about going. But, I flew to Croatia and I piddled around there. And then I took a bus down to Dubrovnik and I piddled around there. And then I took a flight to Athens and piddled around there, and then got an overnight ferry by myself and went out to Greece and met up with some really good friends there for a couple days, came back, rented a car, drove up the coast of Croatia by myself for 4.5 hours, met up with my daughter's college tour for a couple days. And I kind of needed that renewed sense of adventure. I had,
Yeah.
you get a little stale as a parent for yourself sometimes. And I had really, I lived for my oldest daughter's collegiate career at Cal. And now my younger daughter is also in volleyball at Colorado Mesa University, and had just really delved into their careers and loved every second of them, and decided it was time I needed to do something for myself. When I saw you, I had headed to Spain for 10 days, met up with some friends that had moved there, visited with them for a couple of days, and then went to Madrid by myself, came back. And next week, a bunch of friends and I got the much coveted permits to Havasu Falls on the Havasu Bay.
Oh, good for
Yeah.
you.
Well, it took all day, 3 of us trying, refresh for about 9 hours, but we did it. So that's going to be really challenging for me. I still haven't done anything. I mean, it's a, 5, 6, 7 hour hike in, pack out. It's going to be hard. I'm really excited. And so I decided I need to physically keep moving a little bit more. I'd gotten a little sedentary. So that's what's going on right now. We'll see how it goes. I'm not afraid to try things, but you got to be smart. We're getting older, and things hurt now, and they hurt not because you did something. They just hurt because they hurt. So I'm doing better than a lot of my friends, to be honest. We all know people that have had the hips and the knees and the shoulders and replaced and the surgeries. And so far, I'm staying ahead of that game. And I'm going to do everything I can to stay out of the health system with the things that I can control as long as I can, as much as I can.
Well, we know you're not afraid of hard things, but I am just so grateful to have you on this show. And those of you who are listening, I want you to think about this for a second. The stage may change, pressure may evolve, but what does it take to be really great? Missy competed in a time without social media, without constant noise. Today, athletes are dealing with all of that and more. So what does that require now? More discipline, more focus, more resilience, or maybe something a little deeper, self-awareness. And here's the real question. You may not control the environment you're in, but are you controlling how you show up in it? And that's what Rise and Grind is all about. And that's why we have the unique opportunity to talk to former athletes like Missy Marlowe. Missy, your insights are going to change a lot of lives. There are so many athletes, not just young girls, who are still looking up to you because you've had that experience. They want to visualize being where you were. So thank you so
Thank
much.
you. That's very kind, Thurl. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much for honoring us with your presence, and good luck in all your coming adventures.
Thank you. It's been great to talk to you.
That's another episode of Rise and Grind. Thank you for joining us. And go on, and if you like what you've heard, send us a comment. And we will talk to you next time. We'll see you next time on Rise and Grind, the Thurl Bailey podcast. Take care of each other. Have a great week.